Gotta love going last. I'm gonna keep this brief, y'all. Good afternoon. Thank you, Cobb Democrats, for allowing me to speak today. As he just said, we've got kind of Windy Hill down to almost top of East Point, Mableton over to just inside 285 is District 38. And it's a huge geographic region with a lot of socioeconomic difference, racial difference. But one thing that it does have in common is that it has not been represented in the Senate for years. There has not been active, vocal, innovative representation at District 38 for years. For those of you in this room who have been, you've heard the candidates year after year come up and say the same thing. I'm going to tell you a little bit today as to why it's different this time. But before we get to that, just a little bit about me. I'm yet another immigrant here before you. I was born in Toronto, Canada, to Jamaican parents. My father was a union welder. My mother was a nurse. And you might wonder why Jamaicans are sitting around in snow in Canada. They wondered the same thing when I was 5 years old and decided to move to Miami, where I grew up. Very, middle class neighborhood. And even though my father had a third grade education, he was very much a proponent of educating, making sure that his kids had access to good schools. We had an equivalent kind of like Hope in Florida, and I was able to earn that scholarship and go to the University of Florida, where I got my criminology degree and studied criminal deviance and all the issues that we're talking today about why people have issues in the criminal justice system, why, what's baked into the system to produce these results. That's my background. I also had the opportunity to have my first small business. I owned a coffee shop in college called The Ox, which was the first time to be able to see the power of creating inclusive space for people to feel seen and heard and what that does to bring folks together. And when I graduated, I moved up here to Atlanta, not thinking I'd stay. I thought I'd kind of do coffee for a little bit after I sold my business and then go elsewhere. But Atlanta does what Atlanta does. It wooed me. It kept me here. It was the food. It was the culture. It was seeing that we had leadership that looked like me, that sounded like me, that made me want to stay here. And so I went to Emory University School of Law on a scholarship as well, and was a child policy fellow. So looking at when you actually serve mothers and families and children from the ages of 0 to 3, how that produces outcomes in our schools, in our job markets, in our crime rates. And upon graduation, it was a bit of circuitous route, but I ended up largely being in government structure. So I worked as a staff attorney for a superior court judge. That's everything from death penalty cases to assaults, that's child custody issues and divorces to contracts, running the gamut. I was able to see that in our criminal courtrooms, there are a lot of folks who are Black and brown that I would see the same faces recurring throughout, and seeing how when we treat people as we're just wanting to clear these dockets as opposed to solve some problems, how we get these very same results that we're dealing with today. I worked at the Fulton County Law Department in both their employment law section and their emergency service division. So think officer-involved shootings, improper searches and seizures, being able to represent folks in federal court there. And I ended my legal career representing school districts. So working to represent Atlanta Public Schools, Fulton County Schools, DeKalb County Schools when the boards or their teachers were sued, was able to defend them from suit. But throughout all this, as an attorney, where I really got my joy was when I was out in the community, whether that's working in anti-sex trafficking, which is still a major issue here in Atlanta, working in affordable housing, making sure that we were pushing through City Roots ATL, we were pushing the city of Atlanta to have a comprehensive affordable housing plan on the west side of town, or being able to bring food into our schools. and not just to our children while they're in those walls, but to the entire family unit, and then tracking how that affects educational achievement, reduction of student disciplines, parental involvement, just by making sure that our kids are fed not just when they're in school, but their entire families throughout the year. And when I finally decided that I wanted to transition to really sewing into my community, I became a real estate agent, which is what I do now, buying and selling residential real estate. And it also gave me the opportunity in 2020 when we all felt that call to jump in. So I started the Georgia 55 Project, which started small, but it turned out to be the largest Get Out the Vote organization that was a grassroots effort in the metro area. We were able to serve every majority minority precinct in the metro Atlanta area. And I'm saying not just line warming, which we did, like Beat spoke about earlier this morning, but providing education to voters. We were able to bring people to the poll on election day. We were averaging a ride every minute for a voter from when the polls opened until an hour after they closed. And when we were done and basking in the victory of being able to get the result that we were trying so hard to achieve, came SB 202, which folks have spoken about today. I'm curious as to how each of my representatives voted on SB 202, so I looked it up. And I realized that my senator hadn't voted on the bill, which made me dig into her whole history. And I realized she hadn't voted that session. I realized that there was an issue with chronic absenteeism. I spoke to folks in the community and asked them how easy it was to get their problem solved, and they said they haven't seen her. At a time when we're seeing bills that target transgender students and their families, when teachers are being forced to manipulate history into a political narrative, and figuring out what books are on the shelves of our libraries, at a time when housing is exceedingly unaffordable, our roads continue to be congested because we're not tackling public transit, in the midst of an international pandemic that has taken the lives of our brothers and sisters and loved ones, we have a senator who has done nothing. And I think that that's unacceptable. We have a lot of work to do. We need to make voting easier and not harder. We need people to have access to affordable health care, to be paid a living wage so that they can actually have safe and affordable housing and afford that. We need to fully fund education, period. Fully fund. And start actually speaking about education and not parroting political talking points and setting our teachers and students up for success in the classrooms. But how do we actually achieve all the things that all of our speakers have spoken about today? We need to have intention and innovation. We cannot have people who sit and wait for things to come across their desk. We need to have people who are actually pushing things forward. So I did promise that I would speak to those of you who have heard this story before for District 38. Things have changed. For all the negative that has happened with the redistricting process, it's a new game in District 38. Here's the insider baseball. With new district lines, about a third of the district has never been served by the incumbent. You know the old adage, you've got to tell them to fire the last person before they will hire you. That doesn't apply to a third of the folks in the district. So that's one. The new lines push the district farther north, right? Like we're in District 38 right now, and a little north of that. All those folks have no allegiance to her. And nearly 46,000 new voters in District 38 are younger and more diverse than the traditional stronghold of voters that have been voting for this incumbent for the past 22 years. Last election cycle, Devin Barrington Ward and Tanya Robinson were able to get almost 40% of the vote in District 38. Tanya's in the back, Devin as well. Both of them are supporting my campaign. Remember, we only need 50 plus one. So the idea that you already had a number of folks who are willing to vote against the eye in the middle of a pandemic, when both Tanya and Devin were not able to knock on doors, they had difficulty raising money because all of us were financially contracting. We're in a different landscape now. And they are just two of the 300 individual donors that have donated to my campaign. I have more money that has been raised than all three of the candidates in my campaign combined. We're ready to go, okay? It only works if you guys are willing to help. We're at a tipping point here, and even if you don't live in District 38, we all know that what the work of each individual senator does affects every single one of us across this state. So I'm asking for you, number one, if you're in District 38, I would ask for your vote. If you have a question, please feel free to email. Please feel free to call and contact. My commitment is to be a contrast and be sure that I'm actually speaking to the folks who I represent. Secondly, we need help with donations and volunteering. Tanya and my lovely mother will be back out there if you'd like to sign up to be able to help on the campaign. We know that we're on a tipping point in politics in general and in this district, and we need all hands on deck. And we can't afford to have a single empty seat at the Dome. We can't do it. So I'm asking you to help fill this seat. Head to brayforgasenate.com. For those of you who are online, Zach Jones is in the comments. He will drop that link there. And if you guys have any questions online, you can contact him there. And for those of you in the room, I can't wait to speak to you. Thank you so much.